Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I hope you had a great Shabbat with your family and with your congregation. So this week we are going over Parashah 10, which is Mikketz, which means in English at the end. So this continues on with our story about Joseph, and his brothers, and also Yaakov, Jacob. And so let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so we are picking up in chapter 41 of Bereshit, or Genesis, and we pick up with Joseph is still in prison, and so we see here Pharaoh has two dreams, and both of them show either some cattle or some corn stalks that look good, and then some other ones that appear to actually eat up the good ones, but still look just as bad as they were before. And so Pharaoh has these dreams, and it bothers him a lot, and so he calls for the court magicians to come in and basically try to interpret his dreams. Well, no one can interpret them. So Pharaoh is still distraught about it. Back then, they were a lot more cognizant of dreams meaning something than we are nowadays, I guess. And so when they had dreams like this, they could really bother them. And so while he's contemplating this, the cupbearer remembers Joseph, and he tells Pharaoh, "I remembered how I've sinned against. I've done these sins." And so, his inclination is what he's talking about is he remembered that he did not remember Joseph like he told him would, and so he had sinned against Joseph by not remembering him. I mean, now it's been 2 years since the last Parashah, so Joseph's been in jail another 2 years since he interpreted the cupbearer and the baker's dreams. And so, anyway, so the cupbearer remembers Joseph and tells him how Joseph had to interpret both him and the baker's dreams. Both his interpretations came to pass exactly the way it was going to happen. The baker was hanged, and the cupbearer was restored to his position. And so Pharaoh calls for Joseph to be brought in. Okay, now, if you're Joseph, I mean, you had to be a little bit nervous about coming into Pharaoh. Pharaoh basically had the power of over life and death in all of Egypt. If he says you die, you're going to die right then and there. And so we don't know what happened to the magicians or whatever, but I mean, you get Pharaoh mad enough, as you saw with the cupbearer and with the baker, you're going to be thrown in prison, and with the baker, he actually got hanged. So Pharaoh's not someone to trifle with. And so Joseph is get cleaned up, he's shaved, and all those different things that they do to actually present someone to Pharaoh. Egyptian culture had their own way of how people were to look, just like we do nowadays, especially when going before Pharaoh. So Pharaoh tells Joseph that he's heard about him, and he wants to know if he can interpret his dreams. And Joseph gives God the glory. He's like, "No, I can't, but God can." But he insinuates that God will go ahead and do it through Joseph. Now remember, throughout the entire story of Joseph, it's been over and over again, you've seen where Joseph has interpreted dreams, either his own dreams or that of others. So he has the gift to interpret dreams by God. And so now, when Joseph tells Pharaoh that God will help him interpret dreams, you have to remember that Pharaoh did not look at the Hebrew God like we do. In Pharaoh's mind, the Hebrew God was just one God in a whole pantheon of gods. Okay? He didn't deny that the Hebrew God existed, but in his mind, he was just one God among many. Okay? So he didn't refute Joseph. He didn't say, "Hey, that God doesn't exist." He just didn't look at it like we do. And you're going to see that later on as we go into Shemot or Exodus. You're going to see how that theme rises again. All right, so Pharaoh tells Joseph the dreams, and once he hears them, Joseph basically tells him, "Hey, these dreams are the same. You've heard them twice, and they're both represented different ways, but they're basically the same dream. Not only that, but because you've had them twice, that means it's a sure thing, and it's going to happen quickly." So what did they mean? So Joseph told him that you're going to have two seasons of time here. The first season is 7 years of plenty. You're going to have so much where you can't even use it all. And then the second season of time, you're going to have 7 years of famine. And it's going to be so bad that all that was there is going to be eaten up, and no one will remember the years of plenty. It's going to be so bad. Now, remember, all Pharaoh asked Joseph to do was interpret the dreams. Joseph goes further. He not only does he interpret the dreams, he also tells Pharaoh exactly how to respond to it. So he's just showing extreme wisdom here. And it really goes, it actually shows you why Potiphar and also the commander of the jail put Joseph over everything and just kind of forgot about it. The man is so capable that he's able to do pretty much anything he puts his mind and his hands to. And so he tells Pharaoh that to appoint someone to go ahead and oversee gathering all the overabundance from the first 7 years, so that when the famine comes, they can distribute what's been overabundance the first 7 years in the second 7 years. Now, it takes a lot to impress Pharaoh. And remember, to the Egyptians, Pharaoh is a god. Okay, so when you see Pharaoh impressed, that's something pretty awesome. Okay, so Pharaoh and his servants are awestruck by Joseph's answer. They can't believe what they're hearing. And Pharaoh is so awestruck and so overcome by Joseph's wisdom that he says, "Are we going to find anybody else in all of Egypt who obviously has the Spirit of God in him like this man, like Joseph?" And so he makes Joseph second in command, like the governor of all of Egypt. Okay, and puts him over the project to go ahead and basically keep the grain aside that's overabundant, so they can actually be dished out in the second 7 years. Okay, not only that, but it's insinuated that Pharaoh takes him in the chariot that's for the second in command of all Egypt. And Pharaoh rides out in his chariot alongside Joseph, and they ride out parade all over Egypt, presenting Joseph as a governor of all of Egypt. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a pretty awesome story. Joseph basically goes from being thrown in a pit, sold as a slave to Ishmaelites and Midianites, sold as a slave in Egypt, accused of something he didn't do, thrown into prison, forgot about in prison, and then now is coming out of all that, and now he is second in command over all of Egypt. I don't know. That's pretty hard to get a much better happy ending than that. That's pretty awesome how God has turned that around, completely around for Joseph. And it just shows you that even in the worst circumstances, God is still in control. And it shows throughout the story and insinuates that Joseph kept his faith in God. He didn't lose it. Even though he had been treated like garbage, all these unfair things have happened to him and everything else, he kept his faith in God. And now that faith is being rewarded. And so when you're, there's many of us who probably have never even imagined going through something like this. But even the small things, when you feel like something unfair is happening to you, or you're not getting where you want to go, or all these different things of that nature, keep your faith in God, and it will be rewarded. It's just as you see here with Joseph. It may not happen how we want it. I'm sure Joseph didn't want to stay in prison as long as he stayed in prison. I'm sure that he didn't want any of the unfair things that happened didn't happen. But even when they did happen, and things didn't happen the way Joseph wanted, he kept his faith in God, and eventually it all worked out, and God got the glory for it, and Joseph was vindicated. And God will do that for us as well. Oops. Okay. So, not only was Joseph vindicated and things kind of turned around for him, but also through Joseph, the rest of all of Canaan, was actually saved. Because remember, this famine was worldwide. It was the entire area of Egypt and basically all the Middle East. Okay, and so through what happened with Joseph, all of Canaan was saved. They all went to Egypt to get food. There was so much food there that there was enough even to sell to all the nations around them, to where none of them starved. And so, that was a part two of the happy ending, where all these people who could have starved to death were saved because of Joseph's obedience and faith. And this goes to show you that when God finds somebody He can work with, He can work through that person to do things that don't just help them, but help people way outside even their sphere of influence. All right, so now we're in chapter 42, and so the famine's going really strong in Canaan, and so Yaakov basically says, "Hey, get down to Egypt and get us some food because we don't have any." So all the sons get sent down there minus Benjamin. Okay, now remember, we have this whole thing going on with Yaakov where he's showing favoritism. He continually shows favoritism to the two wives of Rachel. Okay, and the others are kind of like, I don't want to say it this way, but it's kind of how it seems. They're second-rate sons, where they don't have the same status as Joseph and Benjamin. It's not fair. It's one of the things. It's one of Yaakov's character flaws. But it wasn't just his. Yitzchak did the same thing regarding Esav, only not on the same level. And so I don't know if that's something Yaakov picked up from his father, or it's just something that he's doing. But anyways, I'm sure that whole thing has not been lost on the rest of the brothers. And you can imagine. I mean, your father prefers one son over or two sons over all the others, and the only reason why is because he prefers one wife over all the others. It's just a really bad deal. It actually emphasizes why we only have one wife and we only have one husband, because of this whole jealousy mix. It's just really bad. It never ends well. Okay, so when they arrive in Egypt, Joseph's there with the others who are actually distributing food. And so he recognizes them, but they do not recognize him. And so he proceeds to speak really harshly with them and test them, accusing them of being spies. And the whole thing is I don't know if part of it was to kind of inflict some pain because of what they'd done to him. But even if it was, his righteousness prevailed. He stuck straight to treating them as spies, and the whole point of this was to test them, to see what they were, who they really were as people, because it had been a long time. So Joseph accused them of being spies. The brothers said, "Hey, we're not spies. We just came here to get food." But Joseph's like, "No, you came here to see where our weaknesses are, so you can come attack us." Which is, I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of weird. I mean, what are they going to do? Go run back and tell somebody to go attack them? But in the brothers' mind, they don't see that. All they see is they're being accused by this high official of being spies, and they're scared out of their pants. Okay, so they go through all this, and so Joseph's like, the only way you can go ahead and prove to me that you're not spies is to go ahead and bring back your brother Benjamin. So in the process of him interrogating them, they tell that they're one of 12 sons belonging to their father, and that one son's gone, the other son is still back with his father. And so that other son that's back with his father being Benjamin. So Joseph asked to bring him, and so they go to return. So they go to return to Canaan. They've left Shimon or Simeon there as collateral, because that's what Joseph said. Leave one of your brothers here. Go bring your brother back, and when you do, I'll know that you're good to go, and you can go ahead and all leave and bring food back to your father. But when they leave, they realize their money had been returned to them, and so they're like, "What is God doing to us?" And right before that, there was an argument with them, and Reuben's like, "I told you not to sin against the boy, but you didn't listen, and now his blood is being required of us." So they really think they're being punished for what happened to Joseph. Now, Joseph has a really good heart, and you can tell this because when he hears them arguing, he hears the fact that they may have feeling some guilt and remorse, and hadn't forgot about what happened to Joseph. He goes out and cries, and then he comes back and then proceeds to tell them to go ahead and leave Shimon, and then go ahead and leave with food to their father. So, when they come back to Canaan, they tell Yaakov all that's happened. Yaakov is not happy. Okay, not only has he lost Shimon, but now they have no way of going back to get food. So because Yaakov was not willing to send Binyamin down with them. It's bad enough that Shimon's gone, and I guess he's willing to leave Shimon to languish in prison, but he's not going to send Binyamin. And again, the whole thing is because he is one of the favored sons, because he's from his favorite wife, Rachel. Again, none of this is fair. A lot of times people try to gloss over this and try to, wash it out a little bit and not make it seem as bad as it is. But the point of the matter is that Shimon is being left to languish in prison because Yaakov was unwilling to send Binyamin with the rest of them to go down, prove they're innocent, get food, and get Shimon out of prison. Now we can go through this whole thing where Yaakov was mad at Shimon and Levi because what they did to Shechem because of Dinah, but I don't think that Yaakov was willing to leave Shimon in prison because of that. It just doesn't seem that way. Okay, so we go into chapter 43. It's been a while. All the food is gone they brought. And now Yaakov asks them, go down and get more food. And Yehuda's like, Judah, he's like, remember what the man said. You will not see my face again unless you bring Binyamin. So Yaakov at this point proceeds again to blame them for the situation because they shouldn't have told the man about his household. Now at this point, Yehuda gets a little annoyed. He's like, how were we supposed to know what this man was going to do when we told him this? He asked us plainly about our family, and we told him. And when we told him, he told us to bring back Benjamin. And not only that, he was like, if we would have left, we could have been down and back twice now. So Yehuda's not very happy with Yaakov and his accusations and the way basically Yaakov is behaving. Now Yaakov is behaving this way because he really does not want to send Binyamin down there, and he's feeling increasingly more cornered to where he's going to have to send Binyamin. So Yehuda, sensing his pledges, says, hey, if I don't bring back Binyamin safe, let me be cursed. You can blame it on me all my life. Now notice here, there's a pattern here. Yehuda's really taking the lead amongst his brothers. Reuben tried, but it really didn't work very well for whatever reason. It could have been that Yaakov was still mad at him for sleeping with one of his concubines. It could have been a number of different reasons. But Yehuda takes the lead here, and he is really stepping up to bat and going and actually trying to reason with his father to get things done. To the point he's even willing to be cursed if things don't work out. So you're really seeing a change in Yehuda where he's really matured and really come of age right now. Okay, so Yaakov agrees finally, but he used a little bit of wisdom. He's like, fine, if you're going to do this, bring an offering to the man. Bring a little bit of honey, bring a little bit of resin, bring a little bit of almonds. bring more silver than you brought back with you, and return the silver the man put in your sacks. Maybe it was a mistake. So he's trying as best he can to butter up this official to where they won't crack down as hard on them when they return, and perhaps they'll come back safe and sound. At this point, Yaakov relinquishes control to El Shaddai. Now remember, El Shaddai is a name for God, and it means the God of breasts. I know that sounds really weird, but notice the imagery. Breasts are for somebody who nurses. So the God who nurses, the God who provides all we need. Okay? So he's recognizing that God has always provided all he needs. And he just relinquishes control of Benjamin to El Shaddai. And he goes, look, if I go down to my grave with mourning, I go down to my grave with mourning. If it happens, it happens. He gives up and gives it to El Shaddai. Okay? So it kind of insinuates that all this time, Yaakov was trying to keep a stranglehold on Benjamin to make sure nothing happens to him because of what happened to Joseph. And at this point, he has no choice but to give up that control. That's hard. And it's even harder when you're playing favorites. But even if you're not, it's hard to go ahead and give control, especially over somebody who you love very much. Okay. So the brothers return, and they go ahead and bring Benjamin with them. All right. Now, when they return, Joseph knows they return and has the man over his house bring them into the house to go ahead and sit down for a meal. So the brothers go in with their offering in hand, but in their eyes, they're being cornered. They're afraid that they're going to go into that house, they're going to be jumped on and forced into slavery over what happened with the silver being returned to their sacks. So to head this off, they go to the man over Joseph's house and say, hey, look, our silver was returned to our sacks. We didn't do this. Someone returned it to us. And the man tells him, be at peace. I know about it. I'm the one who did it. So Shimon joins them, and they all bow down before Joseph, bringing forth their offering. Now, this bowing down, as has happened several times already, think back to the dreams that Joseph had in the last Parashah, okay, about all his brothers bowing down to him. It's coming to pass. Okay, they don't realize it, but he knows it. All right. All right. So as they're bowed down and they're offering this offering, Joseph asks about, well, how are you doing, and how's your father? And they say, we're well, and he's well too. Okay, so it's kind of small talk. No, they're still just trying to escape out of there with their skins, and Joseph's, just trying to inquire about how everybody's doing. It's kind of interesting how Joseph's thinking about one thing, and they're thinking about just trying to get out of there. Now, Joseph finally sees Benjamin, he blesses him. And he's so overcome with compassion about seeing his brother that he has to run out into an inner room and cry before gathering himself and coming back inside. So, as you can see, we're starting to see more and more of Joseph. Joseph's a man of passion and compassion. He has a big heart, and he really does care about others. And you saw that in the prison. You saw that in all the households he was over. He cares about others. Okay, so at the banquet, Joseph, his brothers, and all the Egyptians ate separate. Now, it may seem weird. Why are they all eating separately? Well, Joseph is the head of the house, so of course he eats separately by himself. His brothers were by themselves, and the Egyptians did not eat with his brothers because Egyptians don't eat with those who are flock herders, okay? So, in Egypt, it was an abomination for you to actually herd sheep and goats, okay? And so they did not eat with anybody who did those things, all right? And it all has to do with their religion and their gods and everything else like that, where they didn't do that. Now, how they're seated to eat, so I guess you can imagine kind of a long table. They're seated in order of birth, with Benjamin receiving a 5 times larger portion than all their brothers. Now, their brothers recognize that they're all seated in order by birth, and they're astonished. How did he know that? I mean, how does this man know, which of us are younger or older than the others? And because again, they don't know this is Joseph. So how did this man know this? So it says they ate and they made merry. They celebrated. Okay. Now you can imagine the brothers are still scared for their lives. I don't know how much celebrating they were doing as they were sitting there eating. But Joseph was obviously celebrating, and so were the Egyptians. Joseph was celebrating because all his brothers were there. Um, I don't think the brothers were celebrating very much. They were just really wanting to get out of there alive in one piece. Okay, so they're ready to leave and go back and return with grain for their family, for Yaakov and everybody else, so they don't starve. And so as they're leaving, Joseph tells the man over his house to go ahead and return all their money to them again, and this time to put the silver cup in Benjamin's sack. All right, so they're leaving, and the man of the household catches up with the brothers, and it basically accuses them of, taking the silver cup and returning all the good that Joseph had done for them with evil. Now the brothers are like, we didn't do this. Far be it for us to do this. There's no way we would have done this. It says, search over our sacks, and the person you find the cup with, let that person die. Not wise words. And this has happened before, and it happens later on in Scripture where people make these really unwise promises, unwise vows, and sometimes it ends in absolute tragedy. Again, this is a lesson to watch what you say. Now, in this case, the one over Joseph's house was righteous, just like Joseph said, no, the person who caught it will merely be my slave, and all of the rest of you will go free. Okay, now the person over his house could have said, okay, sure, that person will die, and the rest of you will go free. That's not what he did, though, which shows you the righteousness in that man. All right, and it makes sense. I wonder if Joseph picked the man of his household. Maybe this man learned about Joseph's God and began to worship him and learn his ways. We don't know, but it kind of hints that this man feared God. Whether he worshiped other gods or not, we don't know, but he at least feared the God of Joseph and Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Okay, so as they're searching through, of course, it's found in Benjamin's sack, and all the brothers tear their clothes in grief. They can't believe this is happening. Okay? So now they go back to Egypt again and are put before Joseph. Okay? And Joseph's like, what have you done? He said, did you not know that I'm capable of knowing who defrauded me through divining, through some kind of way of sensing what's being done? Okay? Now Yehuda, again, here he goes taking the lead again. He basically says, "There's nothing we can say. You found us. We're guilty. We're all your slaves." Now Joseph again is righteous. Like, no, only the person who's guilty will be my slave. The rest of you will get to go free. I will not act unrighteous like that. Right? And so we're left on a cliffhanger. Okay. This is actually at the end of the Parashah. I know that most of us are probably like, no, don't stop there, but this is where the Parashah stops. So we will pick up next week, and we will find out what happens to Joseph and his brothers. Many of you probably have read this story before. You know it ends pretty awesome. I won't spoil it for those of you who have not. But it's, again, just as a kind of a side note, God is the best storyteller. He really is. This is absolutely a great story. It's one of those stories that captivates you, keeps you locked into the story, and you almost are left wanting more. And that's the hallmarks of a great writer, of a great storyteller. And God really is the best storyteller. And so, again, this is really awesome. No one tells a story like God does. And not only that, but hey, we're part of the best story of all, because we're just that part of the story of creation. That itself is going to end on that awesome and glorious note. So, again, God and his storytelling is awesome. All right. So, as always, if you have prayer, please go ahead and send it to that email address right there. Keep it anonymous. I don't need anything but your first names and some general information about your prayer request or whoever we pray for. But yeah, please go ahead and send it to me. I'll be more than happy to pray for you or for whoever you're asking prayer for. So again, Shabbat Shalom, brachot to you, and have a great week ahead. And I will see you next time. Shalom.